always saw you as more or less a man of the left. You've never really described yourself, to my knowledge, as like a doctrinaire leftist, but I've always thought of you as part of the left, and but because of the Democratic Party's sort of complete capture by Wall Street, the intelligence agencies, the war machine, a lot of populism, including left populism, has been branded as right wing. And certainly over the past several years, the core liberal value of free speech has been much more vigorously defended in right-wing circles than in left-wing circles. But since October 7th, we've seen the right sort of revert to some of its more repressive ways regarding speech. And so as someone like you who has paid a certain social price, but you've made good faith cross-partisan appeals to First Amendment values, can you give your current assessment of the state of free speech on the right?
Yeah, so first of all, it is getting a lot of attention that large parts of the American right, many influential politicians and pundits and activists on the right have become censorship advocates, censorship fanatics, I would say, since October 7th. But the reality is that this Israel exception for free speech on the American right has been around for a very long time. In fact, on October 6th, the day before the Hamas attack, I saw a story about the University of Pennsylvania wanting to ban some sort of class that was being taught about Palestinian culture. And there were pressures from donors and other activist groups to demand the University of Pennsylvania cancel it. And I went onto Twitter and I said, it's amazing that it was October 6th, that the cause of free speech on the right for many people comes to a grinding halt the minute they arrive at the Israel-Palestine issue. And it's important not to waive these principles because suddenly it's an issue that you care about so much that you don't want to hear dissent to it. It has to be a principle. And it's most important that you apply it exactly in those cases where you feel most strongly. And there had been years before that I was doing reporting on things like these laws that were enacted primarily by red state governors and red state legislatures, but also by people like Andrew Cuomo, that tried to make it illegal to support the boycott of Israel, which is modeled after the boycott of South Africa, designed to bring down the Israeli occupation, like the boycott of South Africa in the 80s was designed to bring down the apartheid regime, which was a form of nonviolent Palestinian protest. And the way in which the West reacted was in Western Europe, they made it illegal by declaring it inherently anti-Semitic. And of course, anti-Semitism is illegal in Europe. So they basically made it a crime to advocate it. But in the United States, where we have the First Amendment, the workaround was these state governors and these legislators passed laws that said, if you want to be a contractor with our state, you're a speech pathologist and the school district hires you to work with kids with learning disabilities or speech deficiencies or whatever. You want to build things for our various agencies. In order to be a contractor with the state, you have to sign as part of your contract a vow, a pledge that you do not support a boycott of Israel. You're allowed to support a boycott of any other foreign country, Peru, South Korea, China, whatever. You're even allowed to support a boycott of other American states. That was what was so amazing about Andrew Cuomo doing this, was Andrew Cuomo had led a boycott of Indiana and North Carolina because of their trans bathroom bills. He did it by executive order. He banned all non-essential travel to those states by state employees. And then he turned around the next year and said, if you boycott Israel, we're going to boycott you. Now, the conditioning of state employment or state contracting on a loyalty oath to a foreign country or pledging that you don't support a boycott of Israel is so blatantly unconstitutional that I can hardly imagine how they were able to get themselves to do it. Thankfully, most federal courts have so ruled that. But that had a lot of support on the American right. That came from the Republican Party. So I always knew my newfound supporters and allies and fans and the like had a gigantic blind spot on free speech on a couple of different issues, including Israel. The problem has, not the problem, but the reality is the Israel-Palestine issue had been on the back burner for many years. We really haven't been talking much about it.
Right.
And it was only with October 7th that it really came to the fore. And you're seeing this censorship fanaticism on the part of the very people who have spent years, who built careers pretending that they were so offended by it.
On the left side of this, or so-called left, we just saw this is really blowing up now, where they grilled the university presidents before Congress about whether calling for genocide of Jews would be a violation of the code of conduct of their universities. And remarkably, they all pretty much refused to give a categorical yes or no to that. They kind of fell back on what I think any civil libertarian would recognize as a free speech argument. They wanted to move it to, well, is it being acted against a person, like as harassment? And, to the public, that's a very fine distinction. It just looks like these university presidents refusing to condemn genocide. That's the way it's being framed. Now, I saw Sagar and Jetty did a piece about this where I think he rightly pointed out that part of where this is causing a lot of the so-called woke ideology to kind of light on fire around this is 6 months ago, if the question had been about trans people, if the question had been about black people, would they have been as reticent? Because we've been, especially the right? They've been decrying these speech codes on college campuses and people getting canceled. And he made the point that a lot of Jews, like Bill Ackman, who have been on that side of things, they want the Jews to be considered one of the oppressed minorities. And he's arguing that their reticence is because they don't see Jews that way, that they might be in favor of blanketing them under verboten speech, except that Jews they don't see as oppressed. Do you think that's true? Do you think it seems like this has just caused a lot of cognitive dissonance around these issues, particularly at universities?
Yeah, I mean, just to show you, to illustrate just the complete confusion that's going on here. Yesterday, I don't know if you saw, but Palantir, which is a firm that was founded by Peter Thiel, that does a ton of business with the U.S. security state, they announced, and I had an argument with the CEO of Palantir. Actually, about 10 years ago, Palantir got caught trying to spy on me and do this reputational damage campaign against me because of my support for WikiLeaks, and they apologized publicly and privately. But they announced that they were setting aside 180 new jobs reserved exclusively for American Jews on college campuses who feel unsafe in their environment. And people like Ben Shapiro and Barry Weiss both went to Twitter. Ben Shapiro said, "Love this." And about 7 hours later, after people were pointing out, wait a minute, Ben, you've been pretty clear in your disgust for racial set-asides and for the idea that certain things are held open only for black people or trans people. Why are you now cheering because it's your group? He went back and said, yeah, you know what? Maybe these jobs should be available to everyone. But that wasn't his first instinct.
Right.
So it's a normal human. We're not machines. So it's a normal. We have to fight to make sure that we apply principles equally, because our emotions will lead us to want to not do that. That's an intellectual exercise or a moral exercise. It's not our first reaction. And clearly people like Ben Shapiro and Barry Weiss, when they saw that at first, were thrilled because they didn't realize how radically inconsistent it was with everything they've been saying for the last however many years that made them quite wealthy. The issue with free speech to me, or diversity and inclusion, is exactly the same. It has the problem with all of these college woke programs been that they just don't include enough groups. I thought the problem was with the principle itself, with the whole framework, with the whole concept of dividing us up by immutable demographic characteristics and then judging us or assigning us rights and opportunities based on those as opposed to who we are as individuals. That was my understanding of it. So to now say, oh no, what we want to do is expand the list of people who get these special treatments and protections is exactly the wrong answer. It's the same thing with censorship. Oh, well, if you're going to censor, I want Israel critics censored as well. All you're doing is fortifying and strengthening the system that 2 months from now, when the issue isn't Israel-Palestine anymore, these people are now going to be supercharged and will go back to persecuting the same people they had been persecuting on speech grounds. And the problem is that the right-wing free speech advocates who have been doing this have had their credibility destroyed. Who will ever take these people seriously again when they pretend they're in favor of free speech? So what you want administrators, university presidents to say, I'm not going to punish pure speech. I'm not going to punish a student who writes an op-ed calling for free Palestine, for the river to the sea, or intifada. But if they go to a student's dorm who's Jewish and every day post signs on their door, "You fucking Jew," or whatever, of course, that's conduct. That's going to be punished, but not free political speech.
Right.
We want that. The problem, of course, is that these university professors are the least credible people to deliver that message.
Please clap.